this one. So this is the 5th Asia meeting of the Incubating Feminist AI project for Southeast Asia. And I would like to welcome everybody to join us here in our meeting. And there are a few people who have registered, close to 20 people. So I think they will trickle in as time goes by. But now we are going to move on with our discussion. We have a good number of people coming in already. We have Eleanor Fourier-Toombs and Matthew Daly to lead our discussion on gender sensitive AI policy in Southeast Asia. Eleanor is a senior researcher at the United Nations University Institute in Macau, and she is also director of the Inclusive Technology Lab and coordinator of the research chair on accountable AI in global context at the University of Ottawa in Canada. And Matthew Daly is a professor of computer science and information management at the Asian Institute of Technology. Together, they are doing a project which is closely similar to the project that I'm participating on AI policy, which is gender sensitive, focusing on Southeast Asia. So I would like to invite Eleanor and Matthew to talk about your project and some of the things that you are doing your work on. So we are basically sharing what we are doing for AI and for gender inclusion, especially in the context of Southeast Asia. So Eleanor, why don't we start? Thanks.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. So yes, I can speak a little bit, maybe for 15-20 minutes, and then I'll pass it on to Matthew. Let me just share my screen. And okay, can everyone see it as a slideshow?
Yes, clearly.
Okay, perfect. So thank you so much for having me. So I'm from the United Nations University Institute in Macau. This is a research institute based in the UN that focuses on the study of technologies for sustainable development objectives. And in that context, I'm leading a portfolio of research in AI policy with a really strong focus on gender. And so the project that we're going to be discussing, the research that we're going to be discussing today is based on a collaboration that we have with the ITU Regional Office for Asia and Pacific based in Bangkok and the DFAT, Department of Foreign Affairs in Australia. And so what do we mean by gender sensitive AI? So of course, I know that many people here are quite familiar with the term or the concepts. So I do want to introduce a little bit. I know some people are maybe less familiar, and also how would we approach this in our research. And so the conceptual framework that we're using is to think about high risk uses of AI from one perspective. And certainly, I think when we look at recent research such as, or recent policy initiatives such as the European Union's Draft AI Act, we can start to identify areas in which AI development might be more risky for certain marginalized groups or groups that have suffered historic marginalization. And so in this case, we look at the intersection of pre-existing high-risk uses of AI and 3 areas of risk that are specific to women. The first one is discrimination. So there's many examples of AI systems having different outputs for women than for men, and outputs in particular that would propagate socioeconomic marginalization. So some example that came out about hiring algorithms, for example, Amazon until 2018 used resume sorting algorithm that downgraded certain terms used in women's CVs, such as captain of a female sports team or having attended a historically female college in the United States. There's also been research, as you know, about facial recognition algorithms being less accurate for women than for men, and certain discussions about or concerns about loans also providing higher loans for men than for women, other variables being equal. So these are all areas that need to be monitored very carefully, because of course you can imagine that if this is true, then the impact on women's lives can be immense and into the future. Another area of risk that we're interested in looking at is stereotyping. So stereotyping comes up in a number of different ways in AI. Of course, there's a whole area of research on the representation or the feminization of AI. Many human-computer interfaces or AI interfaces have a feminine presentation, which might be quite stereotypical. So we can think about Sophia the robot, for example, which has a stereotypical female presentation. We can think also about virtual assistants that have gradually become less stereotypically female, but originally presented at very stereotypical, flirtatious, submissive female representation. We noticed that in translation algorithms and other natural language processing algorithms, there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of stereotyping. So this is a research, just a tiny study that we did very recently, a few months ago, where when presented with Pinyin text that had no gendered pronouns, Google Translate would translate into English using quite stereotypical pronouns. So the male pronoun was assigned for philosopher, programmer, captain. Female pronoun was assigned for caretaking, secretary, and so on. In the Microsoft translator, there was just no mention at all of a female gender pronoun. And so in this case, the female pronoun was invisible, which is another issue. And the last area in which we're investigating is the more broad socioeconomics of AI. So thinking about AI as an immense source of power and influence in our society, including such as most technology around the world is like that, and the importance of inclusion in the development and leadership around AI. So as I'm sure many are aware, women are less represented in programming roles, leadership roles, and policy-making roles around AI. And so that also has an impact on the extent to which other issues such as discrimination and stereotyping are noticed, and also the applications of AI to areas in which would particularly affect women, such as health. So this is kind of the broad framework that we're working on. And so in our study, we're focusing particularly in Southeast Asia. And as Southeast Asia has a very many countries and a broad range of AI readiness and AI development across the countries, we're interested in 4 countries in particular. So Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and the Philippines. And so in this research, the idea here is to investigate current state of policymaking in AI and highlight specific risks and vulnerabilities, propose solutions that would be relevant from a policymaking perspective. And so a lot of AI development is nascent, and a lot of applications or risks with, particularly when we consider women, are still case by case. A lot of the examples that I pointed out have been brought up by investigative journalists, for example, and it's difficult to know in a kind of systematic way what are the risks of different technologies being applied. So I think that what we've been trying to do is examine this issue from two ends. One is looking at existing strategies and roadmaps and identifying where women's rights are mentioned, what potential areas or opportunities for having gender modules could arise. We're also providing training to the policymakers to raise awareness to these issues. And we're also looking at crossing with pre-existing women's rights legislations or other gender-related legislations to try to make a connection between the two. And in addition, the gender and women is not in a vacuum, so there's many intersectionalities. And the premise is that because pre-existing marginalization may be at higher risk in AI development than other groups, we're focusing in on certain vulnerable groups in each country and examining how to make sure that they would be taken into consideration in as AI develops in these countries. So just briefly, I'm providing an overview. It's still relatively general, but each country in our study has some kind of AI roadmap. And there's certainly a consideration built into AI strategies of ethics from a broader perspective. And we find this in Southeast Asia, and we find this around the world. There's very little specification of woman or gender in these roadmaps. So it may be mentioned in passing as one term or one group of people that might be discriminated against in AI development, or may be covered more broadly as we want to build ethical AI, as in the case of the Philippines. So in the Philippines, in our research, we found that one of the big challenges is in the socioeconomic inclusion area. And so that is where a lot of our research has focused in trying to identify how women can be more included in the technical area, in technical development of AI. And so that's been a really important area to study. There's also specific vulnerabilities that go across different countries. So an example of that is AI being increasingly used in migration. And many women are in situations of migration, whether it's voluntary migration for work or in some cases forced migration. And typically people that are migrating internally or externally to other countries, for example, in doing domestic work, are not easily able to advocate for their own rights. And so when we're using AI, for example, for visa processing, for surveillance and tracking, and biometric identification, any risk that could arise in terms of errors, in terms of discrimination and so on would be amplified in these cases because the end user of these tools would be highly vulnerable and not necessarily protected by their government. So we have Thailand has both an AI strategy and an AI ethics framework. And there's which focuses on 6 areas. So there's a number of areas in which women's rights could be taken into consideration. As Matthew will discuss a little bit more, our research in Thailand has also included not just women, but also considerations of non-binary genders and the LGBTQ community. And what is particularly interesting here is how this community can be included in notably training data sets so that the output algorithms can be less non-biased and non-discriminatory. So often groups such as this will be marginalized largely because there's no representation in training data sets. So AI models don't know how to deal with these groups and may either incorrectly address them or kind of ignore them, as we saw with the Microsoft Bing example. So Indonesia has invested a lot in a national strategy for AI. It's ambitious in terms of wanting specific sectors to develop AI, notably in the area of food security, smart cities, and so on. Broadly for the region, we're very interested in smart cities. It's a very complex, kind of multi-layered problematic for which we still feel that there is not enormous amount of research being done on the impact on women of different technologies and data sources being used in smart cities. And so as this becomes adopted more and more in the region, we have some work being done in Indonesia. There's certainly a lot being done also in Malaysia in the smart city area. What does this mean for risks such as the ones that I've mentioned before, such as privacy, security of women in these contexts? And in Indonesia, we're interested also in looking at rural areas. How would people be affected outside of Jakarta, and thinking about women, the elderly, and anyone affected by the digital divide. And finally, we have Malaysia, who also has a digital economy blueprint, and has principles of responsible AI in the AI roadmap, again, mentioning values that are very relevant, such as fairness, reliability, and so on. So our interest is to see how these can be harnessed to include much more depth when it comes to women's rights and gender more broadly. And so again, we take into consideration existing cleavages in the society, whether it's racial divides, gender divides, or religious issues as well, which might be brought to light as AI is adopted more broadly in the country. Some of the explorations that we're conducting in terms of operationalizing this work. Gender rights in AI can be mentioned just in passing. So the perspective of this research is that gender or women's modules need to be developed in much more depth and included in national policies. And these modules need to bridge between pre-existing regimes of women's rights from a national and international level, and existing AI strategies. So from a broad international perspective, we can see the women's rights perspective as one of various specifications that have been done, or additions that have been done to human rights from the original Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I'm mentioning this because I think that we're at this stage now as well, where there's been more general recommendations on AI ethics developed by UNESCO. Each country is starting to develop kind of a broad framework on ethics, and then now needs to be some core applications. It certainly is not only for women's rights. There's a lot of other groups that will need to be addressed more specifically in AI recommendations, but it needs to be drilled down and fleshed out in much more detail. And that's why I'm making this parallel, is that historically in the human rights regime, we ended up becoming more specific as needs arose, and as something like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights proved not to be sufficient to really protect rights, the rights of women. And so at the UN, we're always use CEDAW as a basis, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. At a national level, there's also going to be women's rights considerations. And CEDAW does very strongly highlight these original risks that we mentioned, such as discrimination, stereotyping, and socioeconomic exclusion. So those are illegal from an international human rights perspective. So it's important to know that, because it's not just about ethics or values, it's also about an existing track records in terms of women's rights that is already codified in law. So the only thing that needs to be done is not to reinvent women's rights, but just make sure that the application in an AI context is very clear. And that's where we're trying to work. Another area that we want to focus on is more clearly operationalizing from a national perspective, and notably about how to have a gender impact analysis that would be undertaken for high-risk technologies before they would be deployed to the public. So this is taking a little bit of the ambition of the original draft of the European Union AI Act, of looking at a pre-deployment gender impact analysis, as opposed to usually with human rights regimes where we're looking at kind of cases after human rights have already been violated. So the idea with AI is that the damage could be quite large ahead of time, and it would be important to try to capture risks to women before they were deployed. So maybe more of an approach that is akin to what's done in the pharmaceutical industry. You want to make sure you test drugs extensively before you release them to the public. And so one method to do this for gender rights and women's rights would be with a gender impact analysis ahead of time. And it doesn't have to be done necessarily with every single use of AI. There's certainly a lot of AI applications that are less threatening and lower risk. But when in the case of higher risk applications, it could certainly be interesting to ensure that a gender impact analysis is done in every case and the certification is obtained. So I think I've covered a lot of ground. It's perhaps a little bit general. So if I'll let Matthew go continue, and then we're happy to discuss, just hear different perspectives from the group, and maybe go into further detail if that's interesting to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Matthew, would you like to continue?
Okay, sure. Yeah, thanks. And yeah, thanks for the great introduction, Eleanor. I'm going to share the screen. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, so now I'm going to get into a bit more detail on the Thailand part of the project that Eleanor is leading. So yeah, I'm coming from the Asian Institute of Technology in Pathum Thani, just north of Bangkok. And I'm also the CTO of the AIT AI Center, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. Okay, so just to give you an idea where I'm coming from and why I might have some interest in telling you about the state of AI development in Thailand and how it relates to gender and policy. So I'm an AI person. Okay, so I have more than 25 years of experience in the software industry, in particular in AI. I have some early experience in some of the AI applications that are part of these critical technologies that we're talking about in banking, insurance, housing, and so on from the United States. I also at one point joined one of the first AI startups that was working in the job recruitment area. So meaning, automated selection of candidates for a particular job position. Okay, so this is one of those critical areas where, past biases in hiring policies could very easily be entrenched in the system that's being used to match, say, job postings and resumes. So I kind of been in the trenches of AI development in the United States and then later in Thailand all this time. Since 2006, I've been at AIT in Thailand, and where I'm now a professor and, as mentioned, CTO of the AI Center at AIT. So let me mention the AI Center, what it's about. So we basically, our mission is to take advances in artificial intelligence and put them to practice in the Asian region. And of course, being in Thailand, we have a focus on Thailand, okay? So we've built a really great team here at AIT in Thailand, and we focus on things like product development, innovations, and things like that, okay? So this is not an advertisement for the AI Center, but just want to give you an idea of why we're sort of enmeshed in the AI ecosystem within Thailand. So some of the products that we develop relate to vehicle analytics. For example, giving traffic tickets for vehicles violating traffic laws and things like that. And then another big area that we work on is what we call human analytics, where we have more, of course, more potential for bias related to gender. Okay. So besides the product development, we're involved in a lot of research across a lot of different sectors, from health and medicine, the environment, the construction industry, agriculture, energy, and business intelligence. So coming from that point of view, this lets us sort of feel the pulse of AI development within Thailand. And so we see that that AI is being rapidly adopted across all the industry sectors within Thailand. Okay. And so while some of the kinds of applications that are being adopted, for example, automated traffic law enforcement, right, might have some risks related to surveillance and privacy and things like that, of course. But when we talk about gender risks, right, these types of systems are not so worrisome. Okay, but however, others do indeed tend to perpetuate and strengthen historical biases. I'll give you one example from a system that we were asked to develop at AIT. Is a system for smart signage. Okay, so the idea here is maybe you're walking through a shopping center or the train station, right? And as you approach an advertising kiosk, right, the system should be able to detect that you're approaching, that you are, let's say, a 25-year-old male or a 30-year-old female, right? And then give you an advertisement that is kind of customized to your demographics, right? And so what we found, so it was our job to build a system and deliver the system with as high accuracy as possible, and then we leave it, the contract, right, is to leave it to the advertiser to decide, what is the advertisement and so on that is most appropriate for the demographics of the individuals. And so anyway, this is just one example of where there's a very strong possibility of perpetuation of stereotypes and things like this. And we saw very, very little concern or or worry about gender-related risks when doing this project. So that's kind of the experience that we've had in general, right? Is that that AI is being adopted really rapidly across all the industry sectors, and there's very little risk, there's very little attention being paid to the risks in general, right, of these AI technologies. And of course, gender-related or risks related to marginalized groups, these are all not really high in the minds of at least the AI developers and the businesses that would like to exploit AI technologies. So anyway, so given all that, this was a great opportunity that we had through ITU, the United Nations, to work with Eleanor and UNU and the network across Southeast Asia to link up, the AI practitioners, such as the people at AIT and the AI Center, and the broader AI ecosystem in Thailand, to link these people up with experts in gender and so on. Which, by the way, at AIT we have a very strong presence of research and other projects related to risks and development of projects for marginalized groups, including women. So this is the team that we put together for this part of the project. So we have experts both from the AI side and from the gender and development studies side. And so I think it's a really good opportunity for us to work together and to build a bigger network in Thailand that includes both sides of these groups. Okay, so so these are this is just a brief overview of the findings that we found so far. And Eleanor already highlighted some of these outcomes or early findings. So we've been working on a survey of Thailand policies related to AI and ethics, okay? And we've also been interviewing members of academia, government, the private sector, and civil society. So in terms of the AI policies, as Eleanor mentioned, Thailand already has an AI ethics policy guideline that was adopted by law just this year. And so this policy lays down a lot of responsibilities for AI developers, right, in terms of ensuring human rights and things like that. The policy is very good, especially when talking about the need to be sensitive about issues surrounding privacy and data security and things like that. But then it's a little bit less specific when we come to issues surrounding marginalized groups. And so the gender is mentioned in the policy, but it's only in passing, right? Okay, another finding is that there's a huge gap in participation in the artificial intelligence industry by women. A perfect example is the data science and artificial intelligence master's program that we developed at AIT. I'm an integral part of this program. It's a really popular program for students to come from a variety of different backgrounds to take their previous experience and build on top of that to become data scientists or AI practitioners. And the problem that we have is actually, or one of the problems we have is recruiting women. So each batch that we've had about 3 batches in this master's program so far, and it's about 80% men and only about 20% women. And so this is not for lack of trying either. We try to recruit women as much as possible, but there's due to whatever past the culture or whatever, there's very little interest in data science and AI from women as far as we can see, right? So it seems that the cultural environment is developing in such a way that women are not encouraged to get involved in technology, especially AI technologies and data science and so on. Now that may be changing, right? There are a lot of efforts in this area, but as in terms of the state of the situation today, there's a lot of work to be done. There's a big gap to be closed. Yeah, I think Eleanor already mentioned that in Thailand, if you look at LGBTQ plus population, it has kind of a large presence in the culture, but then things are presented in a very stereotypical way. So people have certain stereotypes and so on. And yeah, there's not much representation in terms of training sets and so on for these groups of people. Another interesting thing that we ran into is in the AI industry in Thailand is this idea that all these ideals that we're talking about gender equality and gender sensitivity, that these are Western constructs and not necessarily sensitive to Thai culture, right? Which is kind of a surprising result for me to see. Yeah. So anyway, so from all of these elements, putting them together, we see a really strong need in Thailand for a lot of things. For example, for better training in gender sensitivity and understanding gender issues, as well as AI risks in the broader context. Right? There's relatively little understanding or attention to AI risks and issues surrounding gender and other groups. And then in terms of policies, right, as I mentioned earlier, the AI ethics frameworks only mention gender in passing. So we need stronger guidelines and a better connection between ethics and issues around gender. Yeah. And then finally, of course, we need to close this gap in terms of engagement of women in technology in Thailand in particular. So I think those are my we've just been part of this project for a few months now, and these are the initial findings. And so we'll be strengthening these findings, and we really look forward to hearing whatever feedback that you might have. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Eleanor and Matthew. Now we have almost an hour of discussion. I would like to just put some remark on Eleanor's Chinese sentences that she put up in the first few slides. I don't know much Chinese, but what little I know is that they have a kind of a gender neutral third person pronoun, ta. It can mean both he and she. So it presents a challenge, I presume, when you try to translate Chinese sentences into English, because you have to guess whether the ta there means either he or she. I don't know, just a point that it can, when you do machine translation, that is, of course, as I understand, a challenge for the programmer of the translating algorithm. As far as I know, in English, there is a kind of an idea that they try to introduce a gender-neutral third-person singular pronoun. So people say they when they refer to just one person. I don't know if that is a trend in English that is emerging, or do you have to look at the context every time you translate Chinese sentences? It's the same in Thai language. Also, we have a lot of pronouns, much more than in Chinese. But we also have the word khao, which means roughly third person singular pronoun, which is gender neutral. So yeah, just a remark, just to start up our conversation. And I particularly like Matthew's remark about some Thai people from the industry saying that the concept of gender equality is a Western construct. You know, I smiled when I listened to that, and it relates to, very well to me. It rings very true when you said this, because the whole idea of equality and that kind of thing was introduced from the West, at least to the minds of many people in Thai culture, and the discourse of equality, not only gender equality, but equality before the law and equality of persons, seems to be in the minds of many people in Thailand, because in Thai culture, people are more familiar with hierarchical relations. So yeah, it's a challenge when you try to introduce the AI that is gender aware and is gender sensitive. So yeah, I'm so glad that we got to know each other, because we are sharing much the same ideas. So now we are open for questions or discussions. And another remark is that I used to talk with some women professors of computer science here in Thailand, and I asked them about whether the fact that they are women is an obstacle or is any kind of a hindrance in their work, or whether they have experienced any kind of gender inequality in their work. What I tend to get from them is that they try to create an impression that their work is kind of gender blind, and when they work as computer scientists or as engineers, their gender or their identity is not much of a factor. I don't know whether that is true in other countries, but it seems to me that perhaps in Thailand we have a number of women computer scientists, and they try to blend in, and they try to merge with the other people in the field, which of course is dominated by men, and they it seems to me anyway, they try to not as much as hiding their identity, but as much as they try to focus on the gender neutral nature of the work, as in mathematics, for example. So just some thoughts that I'm throwing to the group.
Suraj, maybe you can call on your, I have a lot of things to ask, but you have a colleague, Stephanie Santos, who might want to respond.
Yes. Stephanie from the US, from Colorado. You are, as I remember, you have anything to contribute, to add to our discussion?
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to thank Dr. Eleanor and Dr. Matthew for such an interesting talk. And actually, yeah, there's a lot being generated in my brain. My field is actually digital labors and the extraction of digital labors from Southeast Asia via ICT technologies. And actually something Dr. Suraj said about the discourse around measuring what is gender equitable made me think about like additional challenges too, in terms of, I mean, if the measure that's and this isn't a critique of the work, it's a recognition of the difficulty of measuring what gender gender equity, right? And the instruments that we have are for example, data about wage gap, data about political participation. And I think maybe that's something that's contributing to this idea that that gender equity, equality, or various forms of equality are Western concepts. If the way we have of measuring data is still limited, or is very much focused on, I mean, and I'm speaking from the Philippine context, the focus is on the number of women, for example, in the paid economy, and the number of women who are participating in political discourse, which necessarily limits other ways that there are other ways that women exercise power in hierarchical societies. So I'm just throwing that in. I thought it was really interesting the way you were capturing these moments of gender inequity that are being reflected in AI and the challenges of addressing them. And then it just makes me think of what continuing steps could be to measure gender equity from, for example, Thai, specific to Thai culture or specific to Indonesian culture, and what that would look like for your research as well. So.
Yeah, and I wonder, one thing I learned from Eleanor's slides, that Philippines seems to be doing very well in terms of gender gap index. It's number 19 in the world, whereas Thailand is number 79. So it's a very large gap between Philippines and Thailand.
Yeah. We used to be number 9, so I'm going to add that. So we used to be the only Asian country in the top 10. So ongoing challenges too.
Yeah. So what are you doing to be, so highly ranked? Is there anything special in the Philippines? Yeah.
Well, I'll just quickly throw out part of the reason I think we're so highly ranked is because of it measures the number of women in paid economy. And as Dr. Eleanor said, a lot of that is migrant work. So the increase in warm body exports reflects in that as well. And the fact, I think, that we've had 2 women presidents. So yeah.
Thanks a lot. And now I would like to call on some others in the group, like Ung Bun Quy. He's a colleague of mine from Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. Bun Quy, would you mind to share some thoughts of yours?
Yeah. Hi, Prof. Actually, I'm from Himalaya, not from Singapore.
Oh, really? I'm sorry.
I'm from Malaysia.
Sorry.
Yeah, actually, thanks for Prof. to invite me. Okay. Actually, I'm a newcomer actually in this group. My area is more to science policy. Okay. I'm not really into this gender studies, but I do have a few questions. Just something come to my mind. Okay, maybe just for a layman, not in the gender studies area. How, take an example of AI, okay, or science computer. How you going to differentiate, for example, whether there is a gender inequality, or actually it's just a personal interest, for example. Okay, we know that this happens, for example, in courses in program like engineering. Okay, not many female like to take the engineering courses. Okay, but the female prefer to go for other programs that, for example, biology, maths, and so on. So those I consider as personal interest. Okay. If you take the example of AI here in this context, so you see there's less engagement or involvement of women in AI? Is it because of inequality, or because it's just the personal interest of that particular person or the woman? I think that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Okay, how to differentiate, okay, and build the scenario by saying that there is a gender inequality in AI. Okay, I think that's the first question that comes to my mind. Okay, as a newcomer to this group. And then the second thing, yeah, Prof. Solesh mentioned about, like in Chinese, I'm Malaysian Chinese, okay, about the use of the words ta, okay, ta, although okay, we pronounce in the Chinese pronounce ta refer to he or she, but actually when in terms of the character in the writing, it is different. There is a ta for female and a ta for male. The same thing to you, like me. Okay, so that's just my a little inputs. Okay, to these conversations. Okay, once again, thank you. Okay, for inviting me. Okay, to this group. Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot. Somehow I have always thought that you're from Singapore, but thanks a lot for correcting me. We have Ronald Musis Vingosa raising his hand. But Eleanor and Matthew, would you like to reply to Bunqui's questions first?
Sure, I would be happy to. I think it's good because there was a few points to be made. So thank you for the opportunity. So I'll just address the idea with putting the translation algorithm as an example of stereotyping is to show how more and more AI broadly is being used to generate language in the sense that it's being used to write text. So in translation is one example. There's other examples that are being used where AI is used to write blog articles, news articles, tweets, all kinds of things like that. And the way in which these algorithms work is that they are trained on pre-existing text. And very often this text is kind of found on the internet. And a lot of historical biases and stereotypes in relation to women and other groups would be perpetuated in the algorithms because the algorithms don't have an opinion. They just replicate what they are fed in a training model. The example with opinion is not meant to, it's just to give an illustration of how this would work. And so we used Pinyin, and which is the using non-Chinese characters. And so in this case, there is no differentiation between the pronouns. And so what we did is only to force the algorithm to pick a pronoun to show the two different approaches. And we found this out after, that Google would pick a pronoun along traditional stereotyped roles. And then Microsoft would only pick the male pronoun. And so one question was raised that in this case, what do we do? So we have several options. One of them is to ensure that the algorithms, the software, Google and Microsoft will always take into account the context and be much more conscious of the possibility that there could be a female pronoun associated to captain, leader, programmer, and so on. Another option could be that we adopt gender neutral terms in AI writing. The second option is maybe simpler, but it seems quite complicated because in languages that have fixed gender pronouns, these pronouns are used very, very widely. But there is a conversation to be had and an awareness to be raised with these large companies that by doing one of these two options, invisibility of women or perpetuating these stereotypes, they are continuing to present a view of women and a view of men in very narrow kind of roles. And when I give the example of CEDAW, this Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, that was adopted in 1979. So it's been a really long time that we're trying to say stereotyped roles of women are harmful because it leads to lower paying jobs, unpaid work, lack of representation in political systems, and so on. And women don't want to do this. The other element is in terms of the appropriateness of the kind of women's rights perspective in a Southeast Asian context. And so I think it's important to take into account a lot of different perspectives, and we definitely want to apply it from a cultural, appropriate cultural perspective. However, I also do think that in terms of women's rights, the pushback seems kind of universal to me, where reactions saying that maybe there isn't so much gender inequality at the end of the day is a response that we get from industry, even in non-Southeast Asian contexts. So that kind of happens very regularly, that there is a kind of tendency not to want to see systemic inequalities and to kind of say, well, today I didn't receive any relevant women's CVs for my programming roles. So if there was maybe qualified women, I would hire them certainly. And so that's a kind of looking and narrowing in on specific cases where in these cases, in the cases of representation, it's more of a systemic issue where research has shown that in the whole pipeline of education, even from primary school, all the way to attrition, where women get programming roles but then leave for a certain role, there's certain issues that make women less likely to hold on or to become part of this field. And of course, because it's such a high-paying field and a source of so much power and influence in our society, it is really important to address. And the last element that I thought was very interesting was a mention of measurement. So the three categories of risk that we look at, I think, have different measurement areas and different levels of difficulty. So the discrimination component, where the output of the algorithm has a different outcome for men as for women, I think this one is, and I'll ask Matt to maybe bring up some ideas too, is that it has more of technical solutions. So when the importance here is to make sure that women are included very strongly in a testing set, so that you can tell if the error rate for women is higher than for men. So for example, for the human resources algorithm, apparently if qualified female candidates were being downgraded by the algorithm is making an error, and is making an error that's higher, more likely to make error for women than for men. And this also happens in facial recognition algorithms and all kinds of different algorithms. And same thing for loans. So if a woman is likely to be eligible for a higher loan and repay her loan, and the algorithm doesn't recognize that and doesn't give a loan, then the algorithm is making an error. So it's a technical problem. And so that needs to be addressed by technical testing. When it comes to stereotyping, then there is the idea of a kind of a value system. And that's where I think going back to what's encoded in women's rights legislation is important, is to look at how we want to make sure to represent women in our society. And that's where there could certainly be differences in terms of what's appropriate and what's less appropriate. And finally, representation, I think, is more, in terms of measurement, it's more of a counting issue. In terms of reasons, is a whole other thing. So then, there's a lot of reasons behind the gaps in representation. So I think I'll stop here because I know others would want to contribute, but I think the measurement is complex, but can be broken down into different risks and different technologies in order to have more specific solutions for each.
Yes, thanks a lot. We have Ronald raising his hand. Ronald, would you mind introducing yourself and then contribute something?
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Ronald Msuzungoza. I'm a postdoc fellow at the United Nations University Institute for Global Health in Malaysia. And I'm also working on gender and digital health. And Eleanor, I think we have interacted a little bit on emails, though we did not see each other face to face. And thank you both to you, Matthew and Eleanor, for such an interesting presentation. It was really good to see you bring these practical realities of these gender biases in terms of artificial intelligence. But for me, I would also want to probe a little bit so that I can explain a little bit about the intersectional gender inequalities that you talked about. I was thinking in terms of language. Can we say language is one of those intersectional factors that makes some particular group of women much more invisible on artificial intelligence? Because, for example, for my local language, I'm from Zimbabwe, our language is gender neutral. So I'm trying to think like maybe comparing like women and men, let's say in Zimbabwe, what would be the stark differences for them in terms of artificial intelligence? Or maybe let's say we want to compare maybe women from Zimbabwe and maybe women from the UK. What is the role of language in bringing out those differences, either between men and women or even within women themselves? Thank you very much.
Yeah. We have my colleague Atit Surya Wongkun. He's doing his PhD in Ireland right now. So, Atit, do you have anything to add to the group? What you think of all this?
Sorry, I'm came here like quite late. I'm just basically upset, but like thanks a lot, and actually like learn that like AIT actually at the moment try to work in the industry. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't actually I have anything to add, but I just like see opportunities to actually like working together. Actually like just like gave an interview to like some of the Matthew's colleagues a week ago. And next month I'm going to have an internship at UNU Macau. So hopefully like see Eleanor's and the team there. I'm sorry, but at the moment doesn't actually have anything to add yet.
Yeah, you're now in Bangkok, right?
I'm now still in Dublin. I just got
an
entry permit to Macau like just last Friday. I'm now trying to like book my flight and quarantine hotel. And hopefully like going to be in Macau like soon. Yeah.
Okay. Wish you all the best. Yeah, Caitlin, you raised your hands. By the way, Caitlin is the leader of our project.
Well, I thank you so much for your really fascinating and very specific spin on the kind of research that we talk about every day, and just sort of seeing it from the Southeast Asia perspective. And afterwards, I'd like to actually call on my colleague Jaime Gutierrez, who woke up very early this morning in Costa Rica, who's the co-leader of A+ Alliance with me. And I'm sitting in Geneva and he's sitting in Costa Rica. I'm sitting in Switzerland, he's sitting in Costa Rica. There's so many things that I really want to comment on, but I think the first thing I would like to comment on from some of the questioners is whether it's a question of personal interest or inequality, if you're still there, sir. Because there are lots of, are you still just, there you are, because I'm going to use an example from the US. Harvey Mudd College first of all, it used to be sort of equal numbers of young women going into computer science at tertiary in graduate school or even undergraduate. But anyway, they started to notice that there were no women studying computer science. And what they figured out was at Harvey Mudd in California was that women who were high achievers didn't want to be sort of out-programmed by boys who had been doing it since they were 14. So the guys were coming in at 18, having done a lot of programming, and the women was their first computer science course, and they dropped out. They also had this problem at Stanford. So Harvey Mudd, for the first year of computer science, has a gold stream and a black stream. And one stream is for the guys who've been programming, and the other stream is for the girls who have just are great at math and science, but never programmed. And at the end of a year, the girls are programming at the same level as the guys who have taught themselves since they're 14. And then they go on, and they've had tremendous success having men and women, who are now men and women, graduate from in their undergraduate in equal numbers. And Stanford also had the same experience where they didn't understand why girls, first year freshmen, were dropping out right away. So it wasn't, when they started having segregated classes that just gave structured computer science to the young women in a year got to where the guys had, self-taught as younger guys had gotten to at 18. So I think it's a question of stereotyping. It's also a question of who's coming in at what level. It's a question of, to Suraj, you're saying that women in Thailand, perhaps your anecdotal experience is that they're trying to underplay any potential bias. They're saying it's all gender neutral. There was a study, again, from the US, from Duke University, where they took diaries for 4 years of engineering students, women, and each of the women wrote, yes, there's tremendous bias. So that was very interesting over the 4 years. But each of the women concluded at the end of the 4 years that they were exceptional. And this might be American exceptionalism, but that they were exceptional, and that even though there was bias, it actually was never going to have any effect on them. And that was also very interesting. And then they went on to actually sort of perpetuate the system, right? Because they survived the system, they were good in the system. And so the point is that when there's systemic frameworks, we have to sort of look at the framework instead of saying, oh, well, girls like biology more than physics or more than computer science. So that's one thing. Second thing that I was fascinated by, and later maybe we'll be able to hear about it, is the stereotypical, because it all seems to me to be about stereotypes, right? There's a stereotype about qualified women. We know that also in human resources. We know it's all about the data, that the data itself is so skewed, the data sets, the women are invisible. So it sort of starts with the making sure that there's balanced data. But I'm interested to know that these ads that were served up, this AI system, Matthew, that you built, was, I suppose what you're inferring is that there would be, it's not up to you as a technologist to tell them what they serve up to a 25-year-old woman, and that what could happen there is that you just get lipstick and perfume as opposed to a consumer electronics, right? And that would be perpetuating a stereotype the same way that we know Facebook, which was successfully sued in 2015. Anyway, they were successfully sued, 2019, that no longer let advertisers serve ads to men differently than women, because men were getting the ads for police departments, formal economy jobs with pensions, middle-class jobs, as opposed to informal economy jobs that were hourly, like a cashier, supermarket cashier. And they were successfully sued. They changed the algorithm, but in 2021, we see that it's still happening, not because they didn't change the algorithm, but because there's as you all know, who work in AI, it's an orchestra of algorithms that all work together. And they haven't now been able to figure out why the algorithms are still serving up gendered menus of employment opportunities. So, and the last thing, I just want to say that I'm really interested in this idea because it's digital colonialism, isn't it? That because English only has male and female, that you take languages that have no male or female and you assign levels to it. And it would be interesting if there would just be a they and it just becomes they all the way through. And of course, there's been a lot of NLP research about the bias in the data. So I'll stop there, but I just really interesting questions and fabulous presentations. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Caitlin. We have Lisa Garcia raising her hand. Lisa, you have a question or points?
Yes, thanks, Raj. The discussion actually led me to think about these issues about when we talk about the barriers for women's entry into the science, into STEM in general. It led me to rethink about those researches that I've read. Of course, we know about the leaky pipeline theory that they have, but you know, sometimes I think that it would also depend on the of course the kind of culture, how men and women are raised and taught, that, you know, men are for engineering, mathematics, etc., and women are, you know, for other courses. But I remember that there was a study done. This is in the Philippines. By the way, I come from an NGO based in the Philippines, and we work on issues related to rights, the intersection of rights and ICTs. Yeah, and going back to what I was saying, I remember that there was this research, I think, done in the Philippines saying that actually in the College of Medicine, I think this is in the University of the Philippines College of Medicine, more women are passing the qualification for acceptance into the UP College of Medicine than men. It's just that they have to ensure parity among men and women. So it's not really true, of course, that men are smarter than women when it comes to sciences and technology. And for that, we also have to look into the history of technology in the world and how women have contributed, a lot of women have contributed to the development of technology, including the development of the internet. Having said that, I actually have a question for Eleanor. Actually, I saw you present something similar to this. When was it? I think that was in May or in early June. The UN Women, you were invited there when we were talking about women, peace and security. And yeah, I was interested because you talked about AI. But when you talked about the risks to women, especially on discrimination, since you've been doing research on, I think 4 countries, you mentioned 4 countries. I was wondering if specifically the issue of discrimination, do you have specific examples that relate to how women and other marginalized groups are being discriminated by AI in the region? Because as I was looking at the examples that you gave, so I suppose they were more Western examples. So in the region, in Southeast Asia, what are those examples that, you know, that floated when you were doing the research? Thank you.
Thank you so much, and those are great questions. Is it okay if I
Yes,
answer now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yes, and if yes, I did use a few slides from the same presentation at UN Women, so my apologies if you saw this twice. In terms of more specific risks, so I presented more known risks and biases that have been shown in pre-existing literature, and we used these known risks as a bit of a framework or a starting point to know where to search. So what we've unearthed is more areas of risks and concern. There's certain areas that we think are particularly interesting in the region. So I did mention the area of migration because AI tools are used in the region and globally in relation to migrants at different stages of the migration process. So in visa processing, in predicting migrant movements, and in identification and tracking of migrants. The technology being used in Southeast Asia is the same, to the best of my knowledge, the same technology that's being used in different migration settings around the world. The specificity is the kind of migration and the way the migration patterns in Southeast Asia. So, for example, the very strong prevalence of domestic worker migration that really affects women is not unique to Southeast Asia, but it's very specific. So it's very strong in the Philippines. It's very strong also in Thailand. That's one area of interest. Another area of interest is the use of AI in policing, and particularly how might the policing of prostitution affect, using AI, affect women. And so that's an area where we're starting to explore, where there's a couple of issues that have arisen in the last few years. One of them is movement of sex work partially online, which facilitates policing of sex work, because obviously the data is more available. There are two sides to it. So there's a way in which this increased monitoring could protect women and make sure that there is less abuse, protect particularly children, which is very important. There's the other side to it, is that in cases where the prostitution is voluntary, increased policing could actually be detrimental to the socioeconomic well-being of voluntary prostitutes in countries where they're not being protected in this employment. So this employment is informal and illegal. So this is an area that has a lot of different nuances, and is, I think, interesting to kind of bring out these issues. And the third area that I would mention is the increasing use, as we discussed, of AI tools in HR. So when certain women's rights issues are not addressed, the researchers, for example, in the Philippines, noticed that there seemed to be a bias in terms of the age of women, where there was lesser propensity to want to hire women of childbearing age due to the possibility of a maternity leave. This obviously happens regardless of AI, but the concern was that the unregulated AI algorithms would propagate this specific challenge unless it's brought to light. These are some of the examples. The tools are typically use the same kinds of tools in different countries, but these are some of the risks in which we're exploring and sort of using maybe more of a case study approach to show how regulators might want to address specific issues in relation to the technologies, and maybe address them as the tools are just starting to be deployed, to minimize the negative effects on women and also other marginalized groups.
Okay, thanks a lot. I have, if nobody has any question, I would like to, I have a question for Matthew. I remember that you talked about human analytics as part of the work that your group is doing. Could you somehow elaborate on that? What kind of people or human analytics, and whether the issue of men and women, gender issues factor in your work? Just my interest in what you are doing, what your group is doing.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Suraj. Yeah. So I guess the one example would be like the customized digital signage, right, that we talked about earlier, that Caitlin brought up, right? So that's an example where the people are very interested in knowing your, basically knowing your the individual's demographic information, age, gender, etc. Then another example would be like in the banking sector. One of the things is that as banking moves online, then this idea of KYC, or know your customer, is extremely important. And so we'd like to be able to recognize individuals from their faces, right, from the mobile device and things like that. And so, for example, we worked with the Bank of Thailand to analyze and benchmark the KYC efforts of Kasikorn Bank, for example. So then we sort of benchmark their system against other systems. And so actually at that time we did not break down the face recognition system in terms of accuracy, in terms of gender, but that's yeah, certainly this is a couple years back, and we would definitely bring that up. And it's not, that kind of thing is not on the radar of the Bank of Thailand, right, which is responsible for regulating these things. So basically, there are lots of different cases where the customer would like to get information about individuals, either recognize them according to face, or another one, I guess, is a situation where, suppose you'd like to do some forensic analysis when a crime has been committed, right? And so you'd like to identify an individual who is observed in one surveillance camera across a network of surveillance cameras. Like, for example, I don't know, those of you that are experienced with Thailand, you may remember the guy who planted the bomb at the Erawan Shrine some years ago. Right? So this was a case where we would have liked to be able to use the surveillance video to track down the suspect, right, very, very quickly. And then, yeah. So anyway, these are some of the examples of the kinds of things that people are interested in us developing, and that all of them have a lot of, there are a lot of risks there in terms of privacy, surveillance, use of individuals' data, and also gender risks as well.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Caitlin?
Can I just can I ask a quick question? Because it's really, so twice you brought up the clients don't seem to be very interested in any of these issues, or aware. Let's say they're not aware. So that's so interesting. Here you are aware. How does one, because I'm sure lots of other people have this problem, interact then with a government or a client that's willfully blind or just, unknowing, in terms of, and it's slowing down the process, right? Which we know, which we hear a lot. So how does, we have some tips or ideas about how to deal with that?
Yeah, that's a really difficult question to answer. But yeah, I think, I mean, when I think we try to keep things at an informal level, right? But try to spread knowledge and understanding, right? In an informal way. So and that, finally, I have to say, if you're running a research lab, right, and someone comes to you with money, right, then it's very hard to say I'm not going to do this because of some potential. Actually, we do this, right? When there is some risk of the system being misused in some way. So there are cases where we've turned down work because of that. But as technologists, right, we need to feed our researchers and things like that. So there's this constant kind of trying to identify what is the line over which we should not cross, right, in terms of technology that could be misused in various ways. So anyway, so my approach so far has been to just have a discussion about these issues as much as possible. But I think some action and guidelines from the policy level will be very helpful, and sort of more widespread understanding and training and so on. Yeah.
Yeah.
I might add to that
please,
as well.
Eleanor.
Oh, yeah. So for this project in particular, there is already agreement by policymakers, the government in each country, that they want to participate. And so we have a focal point for each country in the government, and they've already sent a delegation to ITU to do a training at the end of May with AIT, actually. So we see that there is a willingness on their part, and what we're going to try to offer is additional training, potentially a certification with different modules. So for example, a technology module explaining technologies in more detail and applications, and women's rights module, and kind of how to bring this all together as policy module. And I would say that, to me, I think what's really important is raising awareness. And so I feel that even in industry as well, training is quite important, because there's a lot of examples. So these HR and these loans examples are quite striking. And when people become aware of this, it definitely makes them realize certain things, and how they realize how this could have an effect on women's lives for their entire lives, to have access to lower loans, to not be hired for jobs, and so on. But when people are not aware of this, whether it's men or women, because most women are also not aware of this, that's where you can have pushback, and that's where you can have a lack of understanding, I think, in terms of the importance of this work. But I do feel that usually, whether it's an article that's written or a presentation, I think it's very common to the first sort of response, and often we see it in industry in particular, the first response will be kind of a pushback. And then as we get into more details, and as we provide a more complete picture, then, minds start to open as to the possibility that indeed this kind of far-reaching systemic inequality exists, and it's an issue, and it does have solutions, but we need to address it together.
Right, thanks a lot. And Atit has raised his hand. So, and it's 9:30 p.m. already. So that will be the last question. Atit? No,
I just
go over for a few minutes. Yeah, Atit.
Sure. I just see the discussion going on in the chat box, right? So like I just that just reminds me of one thing, one initiative from Thai government about so when we're talking like this, like face recognition, things like that, right? And also the data set, right? So there's now government agency called like Electronic Transaction Development Agency, right, or EDA, from the Ministry of Digital Economy and Society in Thailand. They joined together with the industry association. Is called AIEAT. I don't know, like for some reason they use this acronym. The AI Entrepreneur Association of Thailand, right? They jointly developed the face data set for Thai people. The idea is that like this is actually down to the Ministry of Digital Policy about the procurement, right? They say like if the government is going to buy, to deploy face recognition system, the idea is like they probably going to introduce the requirement in the procurement that like it should pass some threshold, right, against this in terms of accuracy against this data set. The question that nobody is actually at the moment able to answer yet, it's actually how to prevent the vendor to use this test set as their training set. right? I mean, probably it's a good thing. Maybe I don't know that the vendor is going to use this as a addition, right, to their training set. But that's probably like against the idea of like having a separated test set. I don't know like how this is going to be resolved in the end. Like it's kind of like on one hand they're really aware, right, and they try to provide a solution, right, with this like test set, right, of like phases, right, but I'm not sure whether it's a valid solution or not. That's something to be solved further. But I think like the interesting thing here is like one of the policy that we probably can look, right, to see like if things going to be like effective or not, right, especially in on the government side, is this like procurement requirements. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, Matthew, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting comment, and it reminds me of something that Eleanor raised earlier, the idea that in many cases we have technical solutions to these problems, right? That we just have to use them, right? Such as having a protected test set where we can demonstrate balance and so on. But also there are also other situations where there's no such easy technical solution. You know, for example, okay, so face recognition, right? We can ensure that the test set is balanced in a number of different ways for gender, for ethnicity, etc. Right? But then you think about job, hiring situation, right? How can you make a job training set that is equally balanced for gender when for a particular, okay, so I'll explain how we build these systems normally. Is that the correct answer is that the system should recommend hiring the person who was actually hired in the past, right? And so then how would you then balance that if already the bias is there, and already due to all these other issues that we discussed, that there are fewer female candidates for various positions? It's an incredibly complex and difficult thing to address, right? There's no easy technical solution for some of these issues.
Yeah, and on that note, I think we all agree that all these things need further work and further research and further discussion. Unfortunately, we are out of time, and I would like to thank everyone for joining in and for engaging in lively discussion. I would like to thank all of you for all this, and I would like to end the talk right now. Okay, hope to meet every one of you in person later on, but for now, let's say goodbye. Thank you. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
You're welcome.
Bye bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.